This is a brief overview and demonstration of the IBM Open Pages with Watson task-based view. Renee Owens, the risk owner, on her home page would like to access a specific risk. So from her favorites menu, she has an access to the unapproved invoices risk. And this brings her to the task-based view for this risk. This is where she will complete whatever the activity it is that she would like to complete. Now, before I describe the view layout, understand that we call this a task-based view because the view should represent information to support the user completing whatever the task is. Which means when this risk is being assessed, when it's being approved, perhaps after it's been rejected and is sent back to the assessor, based on that respective stage, then we would want the view to represent the layout and the content to allow the user to complete that respective stage. So yes, there's a dynamic nature of how this can be laid out as it goes through the stages. Regardless, all task-based views have three major sections. There's the header information, which provides key information that you might want to represent and have ever present on the view as the user scrolls around. In this case, we have the risk name and some rating information and the status information. Also, if there's any actions that the user is allowed to take, perhaps actions enforced by the workflow engine, those will also be available on the header information. Dynamically changing through the stages of the risk will be the second section, which is the view guidance section, which provides textual information to the user in the form of guidance, procedural support, descriptions to give the user additional information on how he or she may want to interact with this view to complete whatever the task is. And that's extended to the key items listed, which are the key fields that are important for the user to complete whatever that task is. Again, the key items will change as this record goes through the various stages. At this current stage, which we can infer is currently not being assessed, we can see the various key items are listed right here. So I could select, for example, risk category, and it'll take me right to that field on the third part of the task-based view, which is where the content is laid out. And we can see I actually, for this given stage, I have the ability to edit this field, which may not be the case for every field. And we'll see that as we go through a description of the content or the third part of the task-based view. Now, it's very important that not only the content represents the stage, but also the layout of that content. And we see that for this specific stage for this risk, the layout is as so. We have the first section, the risk overview section, has graphical visualizations of contextual information for this risk, issue contextual information, KRIs, controls by design and operating effectiveness, and as expected, the ability to drill into various parts of in this case, the donut, and come into those three respective and effective controls. If we go back to the risk and continue our tour of this content section of the task-based view, we see other sections such as a general section which has some basic information about the risk, owner status, some data information, reassessment triggers, which provides aggregate information, also drill throughable into the ineffective controls, KRI breaches, any information that may support the user in exploring the risk ratings, which of course become very important during the actual assessment of the risk. And so perhaps the risk rating section, when the risk is being assessed, will actually be at the top of the view. That's an example of revisualizing the view of the risk to support the stage it's on. Notice that some of the sections are collapsed by default. Again, that's based on whatever is important for the stage. Risk acceptance and quantitative measurement, we can see are collapsed by default for this specific stage. Now, before we get to the actual related content, there's the concept of being able to edit the record. Now, depending on the stage of the risk and the user that's logged on, perhaps certain fields are editable or not editable, required or not required, and the user will have some visual guidance on whether he or she can make those edits or if they're required to. For example, we can see right here that if there's a red asterisk next to the field, such as with the risk name and the description and the owner, we can see that it's in fact a required field. Let's say the user for some reason goes ahead and removes the risk owner. So not only are they told the value is required here, they're also not able to save the record because now there is a required field which is not populated. But finally, in the guidance section, they're going to be given an indication through first the red indicator here, one item requiring attention, but they can also take a look at what might be the field that is causing them the inability to save the record. In this case, the owner field has not been populated. So they can come back here and they can go ahead and identify who the risk owner should be. And now you can see that the red identifier is gone and the user has the ability to save the record. Now again, as this record goes through the life cycle, whatever it may be, you are empowered administratively to control which fields are editable, are required, are read-only. And another way for an end user to know what he or she can edit is because we see the ability to go into edit mode at the top of this view. If I select edit mode and I select that checkbox, then the view will present itself and show me ready to be edited all of the fields which are editable, and I can tell date of last assessment is not editable because it was not presented as so when I went into edit mode. So there's a lot of indicators to support the user in being able to really understand how he or she can interact with this respective record. If we scroll further down to the related content, this is where we can provide a list or a grid of related controls for this risk, issues, KRIs, directly or indirectly associated to this risk. And this gives us the ability to actually start interacting and updating the context of this risk. Notice that we have a list of 4 controls which together mitigate this respective risk. And we have the ability to actually make modifications to that, again, if allowed at this stage for this respective user. Perhaps I'd like to copy some controls from the library. And I could select copy controls from library and it takes me right to the area where these controls can be copied, and I can go ahead and search those respective controls and make those copies underneath this risk. The same thing for associations, as well as adding a new control from scratch if the user is authorized to do so. And just like we saw with the task-based view, the new view here gives me the same sort of indicators of required fields that are needing to be populated before I'm allowed to save that respective record. If we go back to the respective risk, we're going to take a look at one more type of visualization that's presented on this risk record. So we'll continue to scroll down past the associations to the tree view. Now the tree part of a task-based view allows the end user to explore all of the relationships, parent relationships, ancestor relationships, descendant relationships for this risk. So we can see that this risk has 4 controls mitigating it as children, and I could actually take a look at a specific control and see what its associations are. And we see that this control has 1 file attached and has 1 test plan associated to it. And I can continue exploring all of these relationships directly or indirectly up and down the object model supporting this risk. And at any point in time, I could then take a look, in this case, at a specific key risk indicator, and now I'm brought to the KRI view, task-based view, with the same layout now specific to the key risk indicator. So to finish off this demonstration, let's go ahead and start a workflow on this risk. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and start the risk assessment for this risk. I'll click continue, and let's take a look see if this risk changes in terms of its visibility to the user. Right away you notice a couple things. First of all, we see that the view guidance has changed. The actual procedural guidance reflects the fact that we are in an assessment stage of this risk. We're going to see differences in the actions to validate as well as the layout of the view. And this will reflect throughout the stages of the risk as it goes through, in this case, the assessment life cycle as defined by the customer.